thoughts, we're always thinking. Our mind is always buzzing with something, whether it be images, voices, you know, uh, physical models, whether it be predictions of the future, any thought at all, any train of thought is a thought, nonetheless. And we never once consider throughout our lives this constant buzzing, this constant humming of thoughts. We never once consider what they are. And if they're always there, we everyone kind of says, oh yeah, you're always thinking. Well, I've had moments in my life where I've been blank. No thoughts at all. And these instances are very rare, and I've only had a few within my lifetime, but I've had them nonetheless. And thinking is one of the most interesting things and the most complex, because things seemingly come out of nowhere. Your thoughts are yours alone, yet they're created. How are these things even created if, you see what I'm saying? How can thoughts be created? How can imagination even exist? How can this even be possible? Because these things aren't a reality in the first place. How can you think of something that doesn't exist? Imagine things that don't exist. Hear people, see things that don't exist. How can this even be possible? And the more I dive into it, it's quite difficult to understand, because it's always there. Even in this very moment, while I'm talking to you, I'm thinking. Be it I'm, talking out loud, there's still, visual thoughts that are going on in my head. I'm thinking of Albert Einstein right now, for whatever reason. I'm thinking about how he was able to imagine his theories and play them out in his head and visualize that. And then I'm, there's so many things going on. I'm thinking about movies and different artists throughout history that had visions just by thought. And this is all simultaneously going on within seconds of each other. I'm thinking of, Da Vinci. I'm thinking of Picasso. I'm thinking of Van Gogh. I'm thinking of, many, many, many artists. I'm thinking of, musicians throughout history, new and old. It makes you really just baffled, absolutely baffled, that the human mind is so powerful that we can simply imagine anything, and it is real. It becomes real in our heads, and we, use this imagination to make inventions. To build cities, to build our own artistic, ideas. We use our imagination, which somehow, some way, by miracle exists, and it seemingly just comes out of nowhere. So this video is talking about the different types of thoughts, because there's not just one type. I've noticed throughout my life that there's many, many, many different types of thoughts that come in different forms, completely different things altogether. And, you know, excuse me, it's really late at night. It's about 12:30 right now. And, you know, this video is a little too complex for my, my tired mind. But, I'm still going to try and dive into this as much as I can. So, you know, some of the thoughts that we have, the easiest thing to remember is memory. You know, recalling events that have already happened. You know, whether it be that one time that, you know, your girlfriend dumped you, or that one time that dude at the carnival told you can't ride that ride because, you know, your brother isn't old enough. Oh, I remember that memory quite well. I got so pissed. You know, you know, whether it be that time that it was Christmas, and that guy, you know, I remember this. This is a memory of mine. It was Christmas Eve, and it was about, I'm trying to think, 2-3 o'clock p.m. and we were going to my grandmother's house, and a teenager, maybe 19, maybe he could have been in his 20s possibly. It was very icy, and he didn't brake right away at a stoplight, and he rammed straight into the back of my mom's car. And my entire family was in the car, and luckily he didn't really do any damage to the car. He just kind of like tapped it very forcefully. The airbags didn't go off or anything, and I don't even believe there was a dent in the car. But, you know, just weird memories like that. Why did I even think of that memory? Why is that what I recall? You know, I'm thinking about, for whatever reason, a vacation I went to, where I was, you know, at an amusement park, and I was riding this one ride, and, you know, I always loved to fly. I wanted to fly at a very young age. I've always had a dream to fly. So I was riding this one ride, and I was maybe about 12, 13 years old, and it would rotate, and it was like a propeller airplane, and you could control it if it was high in the sky or if it was like low, and it was like a fake propeller airplane, and you could like turn the propeller and stuff. It was really cute. But I was kind of old for the ride. I was mostly doing it for my brother, but I still very much enjoyed that ride. You know, things like that. Why did I remember that? So odd. I'm going to, you know, dive into the rabbit hole. If I keep going any farther, I'm going to remember crap that I haven't remembered in years. But why is that? You know, it's just so weird. There's also the voice, the inner voice, the ego, that speaks to you. Maybe it's the subconscious, maybe it's just the consciousness itself, maybe it's the ego, maybe it's a mix. I have no idea who it is. But the voice, there's always a voice in your head, or at least this is what I've witnessed. And that's the voice that's speaking now to you, the ego, me, what I perceive as me, is talking to you. This conversation that I'm having with you is first thought in my head milliseconds beforehand, and, you know, spoken out of my, you know, mouth. But these thoughts in a auditory sense, you know, are always there, whether or not I talk. You know, there's always this narration to life that I've slowly but surely been able to silence over the years. But when I was a kid, it was always there. It was like, you know, I was a quiet kid, so I was always thinking about things. You know, I was reading people and thinking to myself, like, oh, I wonder why that person's, you know, mad at me right now, or, you know, and this would be an auditory thought, something I would hear. It wasn't something I would see. And don't get confused. I'm not talking about like voices inside of your head. I'm saying like a narration to life. The ego talking. This very much is always there for me. But it's silenced when I want to silence it. When I want to live in the now, or when I'm talking to people, there isn't a conflicting narration going on. There's no narration when I don't want the narration to be there. But when I'm not careful and I just let myself think whatever I want to think, this narration suddenly pops up and says, "Oh, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this right, or whatever." Usually this narration appears when there's stress in my life, and this voice is like, "You gotta do this, Alex, you gotta do this to fix the problem. This is the only way to go." And sometimes this voice gets muddled and murky and kind of hard to distinguish, and it almost branches off into several voices telling you to do different things. And this is the idea of choice. You think of different choices, of course. We're not robots. We don't just, I must do choice number one at all times. No, it's not like that. We're always thinking of the different possibilities. And that narration kind of guides you through that. This leads me into thinking about the future. And imagination itself. We create things. We just create it at whim. We don't, we don't have really any basis for these thoughts. Sometimes we have a little bit of a basis in our predictions, but they're very loose predictions most of the time. I mean, some of our predictions are pretty spot on, but it's very much by chance because life is very unpredictable, and you can't possibly imagine, the future. But I find it very interesting that we have such a strong imagination. It's one of humanity's strongest attributes is our imagination. We have so much culture, so much taste. It's being slowly destroyed by certain individuals that don't like your individuality. But besides that, being true, I'm just saying, generally, creativity is what drives us the most. I would say it's the second driving force behind humanity, belief being number one. But I digress. Also, we think of... I'm trying to think of the other thoughts that are there. We've got memory. I'm very tired. We've got memory, we've got imagination, we have the inner ego talking to you. And we have, emotion. It's another facet of thought that we don't think about. We don't interpret our emotions because our emotions are very easily manipulated by the environment that we're in. Very easily manipulated. You can feel anxiety and stress and, adrenaline, which is a very chemical response to your thoughts, but it starts as a thought. And oh shoot, I should have done that, and then you get this surge of adrenaline. It's just a response to the thought, but it's interesting where these emotions even come from. And seemingly, sometimes they have no purpose. Sometimes I feel happy for no reason. I don't understand why I'm feeling happy. I'm not doing anything productive in the terms of my you know, the human evolutionary standpoint of our goals, you know, mating, getting food and shelter, and you know, eventually dying. You know, this happiness that I feel has no real purpose, because what I feel happiness from has nothing to do with my evolutionary standpoint. You know, I never feel happy because I've gotten a mate, or never feel happy or accomplished because I, you know, got some food from my drawer, you know, or fridge or whatever. You know, I don't feel accomplished or happy that, you know, I've made shelter, because I've never really made shelter besides a tent. You know, not that I'm not happy for shelter and food and, you know, so on and so forth, but the point is, I would think on an evolutionary standpoint that the only purpose to happiness would be motivation to survive and mate. But apparently that's not all happiness is brought out to be. And love isn't like that either. You can be in love with family, and be in love with, you know, pets, and friends, and, you know, you can be in, like, you can love them, even though it's a completely different facet of love, which is a whole nother video, because, you know, love is the most complicated thing to describe to people, because there's so many versions of love, just like there's so many versions of thought. But basically, thoughts, I bet you I didn't get through all of them, because I'm tired, and I'm, like, my eyes are, you know, closing slowly, but thought is one of the most interesting things that we don't even consider. We don't even think about thought, because it's constantly humming, constantly going. And for whatever reason, we don't question it, because it drives us in every way. We do everything we do because we think it first, or we're simultaneously thinking it as we do it. In the case of me making this video and speaking to you. So, yeah. It's very interesting. What is very interesting even more to me, than the constant humming of thoughts, is, as I said earlier, the times when thoughts are void. Thoughts are empty. There's no thoughts. And right now I'm kind of feeling it right now. I'm kind of like, oh, you know, being thoughtless. But, you know, when you're especially tired, you can feel this. Your only focus, your only thought is, let's go to bed, you know? But besides that, you're pretty void of thoughts. You're pretty void of reasoning, and imagination. You're very just, you know, dead to the world. But also you can reach these periods of no thought when you're meditating, when you're doing astral projections, when you are in nature, or just anywhere, and you're living in the now. You don't focus on other people, you don't focus on anything except what is at hand, what is in front of you. This can be very interesting if you're, you know, your thoughts are void. I don't suggest doing this because you don't really enjoy it entirely. I think you should let that narration play a little bit, that I was talking about earlier. You know, let the ego play just a tiny bit, to point out to you all the little things that you're seeing, because just simply seeing things and living in the now is very wonderful, and it is very beautiful. But if you don't have that slight narration, you know, turned down on low, you won't really understand what's going on around you. You'll just be like, oh wow, that's beautiful, and even that those words won't be there. You'll just be like, oh, you know what I mean? You'll just be in complete awe and whatever. If you're void of thoughts, but I think it's interesting to reach that state. When I'm very sick, I reach that state. That's why I like being sick sometimes, because you get into that train of thought that's very meditation-like. And being very tired like I am now is very great, because you're just kind of living in the now, very calm, very peaceful. And you can train yourself to be in the now with no thoughts. It's hard sometimes because you get those little flashes here and there, different things. Your imagination sparks for a second, and your narration sparks for a second, and your memories spark for a second. Oh, that reminds me of this, or it's constantly going. But I think that thoughts are just so complicated yet so intriguing, and that's why I wanted to dive into it this video. You can probably tell I've been slowly dying because it's like 1 in the morning now, so I'm gonna go to bed, get some sleep. That's all I've been thinking about the past 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So yeah, love you all. I thought it was a interesting yet beautiful video, and that's why I wanted to share it. So love you all. Peace.